Are you looking to start a long-term reading project but don't know how to organize it? Are you a homeschool parent looking to use books, not just textbooks, when teaching yourself and your child, and are looking for some organization for your prep reading? Hi, this is Time Travel Reads. In my first year on BookTube, I started a long-term project reading US history in chronological order. I didn't have anyone to help me learn to organize my project. I want to save you my trial and error process. In this video, I'll give you 8 steps to design and organize your own course of study. I will use my project as an example. This is probably not the only way to do it, but this is the way that I found helpful. You may not have to follow every step depending on the breadth and complexity of your project. The first step is to make a computer folder. Make a folder on your computer for your project, or get a bunch of 3-ring binders or notebooks if you're not someone who likes doing things on your computer. But I find it simpler to do everything on the computer. I call my folder American History Project. Creative, I know. The second step is to divide your project into categories. If your project needs to be divided into broad categories such as time periods, countries, regions, topics, etc., do so now. These categories will become the names of reference book lists. Make a computer file within your project folder for each category. For my project, that means dividing US history into time periods and in some cases, regions and topics. If you're using notebooks, I suggest having a notebook for each category. When we get into the list making step, put your book list at the beginning of each notebook. Here's how I've divided my categories. If you're doing a US history project like me, you can either copy my categories or change them depending on what's useful to you. My names for these lists aren't perfect, and I'm sure historians would take issue with them, but they're functional for me. My lists include colonial period, revolution, post-revolution to War of 1812, antebellum East Coast, antebellum westward expansion, Civil War, Reconstruction, Progressive Era, World War I, Roaring Twenties to Great Depression, World War II, Korean and Vietnam Wars, Cold War political history, Cold War social cultural history, Civil Rights Movement, Space Program, Cold War President and First Lady biographies, and Persian Gulf War to present. I also have general lists like a general First Lady biography list that goes through the whole chronology of First Ladies from Martha Washington on down, Black history, Indigenous history, women's history, and historical overviews broken down by other people groups, regions, and topics. The reason why I have so many lists for the Cold War is that there are so many books on this time period from so many angles, from military history to music history. And then the general lists can be helpful as references for BookTube history months like Black History Month, or if other people ask for recommendations. The third step is to subdivide your categories. So break down your categories, meaning your files, into subcategories in a way that makes sense for your project. For each of my time periods, I have sections for general history, biographies, and historical fiction. At some point, I also want to add a section for some children's books as well. Sometimes I also break down the general section into topics. For example, my antebellum westward expansion list has a section for Indigenous history. The fourth step is to make list criteria. You'll need to decide what criteria you will use when you search for books to include in your reference lists. My criteria were as follows. I only wanted books that seemed reputable. I only wanted books that were in print because I don't have the budget to go searching for really expensive used books. And if I recommend a book to someone on this channel, I want it to be easy for them to find and not super expensive. And I also wanted books that were available in multiple formats, usually including audio, partly because, again, there are different people that include or that prefer different formats, and I want books to be easily accessible to people. If I recommend something, then I want them to have an easy time finding it in their preferred format rather than thinking, oh, that's not as easy for me to access for whatever reason. And then fourth, I also wanted at least some books covering diverse experiences and perspectives. The fifth step is window shop. Now you get to search for books to put in your lists. Keep in mind that these are simply reference lists from which you'll build your TBR later on. You don't have to read or buy every single book on these lists. Goodness knows I don't have the budget for that. So these are reference lists. And reference lists are helpful because depending on how broad or deep your project is and how thorough your search is, you may be coming across hundreds of books. You probably won't want to remember whether you've already come across a particular book, especially if it's like 1 a.m. or you woke up at 4 a.m. randomly and you can't go back to sleep, and so you think I might as well work on my lists, and you don't want to have to remember whether you've come across that book for the fifth time or not. You just want to be able to look it up on your list and say, yes, I have. So anyway, book buying sites, reading related Discord groups, booktubers channels, book related Facebook groups, and a library site called Hoopla should all be helpful in finding books for your project. There are several things that you should include in your entry for each book on your lists. Be sure to include the full title and the author's name. State whether you'd have to buy the book or get it from your library. If you do have to buy the book, you should probably include the prices from your preferred vendors, just so that you're aware of where your budget is at, so that if you do decide to buy some things down the road, you kind of have a running tab of what it's going to cost you. If the format of the book matters to you, state what format the book is available in at your library or any subscription services you pay for or wherever else you're going to get the book. Saying how long the book is will help you with scheduling later. When you go to figure out how many books you can read in a given month, you want to know how long the book is. Trust me. It's going to be helpful later. You may wish to give a brief description, especially if the title is not very clear about what the book really is about, or any other information you think is relevant. Put it in your entry. And then something else that you want to put in is before the title of the book, put TBR in capital letters in front of the title. And then once you finish the book, change TBR to finished. If you DNF the book, change TBR to DNF. You can also change a book to skip if you decide not to attempt it. That way it's easy to keep track of your reading. The sixth step is to select your TBR. You don't have to choose your TBR or buy a bunch of books all at once. You don't have to do a massive haul. This is a process of discovery. Reading one book can lead you to decide that you do or do not want to read another book on the list, or it could lead you to discover a book you've never heard of before. Sometimes an author will recommend you a book while you're reading it, while you're reading another book. So, this is a process, but Along the way, you will figure out which of the books in your reference lists you actually want to read. And when I select my TBR, I look at Goodreads reviews, I listen to audio samples, because even if I don't plan to listen to the audiobook, I still want to have a sense of whether the narrator is good, because I still may want to report on that from my channel. And I look at BookTube reviews if I can to figure out whether each book is likely to be for me. I make notes in my lists about what the reviews generally said and what I thought of the audio samples. And I say whether I think that book might be worth my time over another similar book and why. Perhaps one book seems like it will be more comprehensive or better written or has a better narrator, etc., than some other book. The 7th step is to schedule your reading. John Green recently said that it's foolish to tell the year what it will do because the year decides, not you. This is true, but you can still make tentative plans. This year, I've tried making a bullet point schedule. I'm not sure how useful it is because I'm trying it for the first time. I don't know. I'm not a scheduling sort of guru, but I just sort of did this in my Aunt Kay's basement, and we'll see if it works. And in a bullet point reading schedule, one bullet point equals one book. You decide how many books is a reasonable number for each book, given book length, outside life commitments, etc. This means that the number of bullet points you use during the holidays may be less than the number you use during the rest of the year or during summer vacation. And then remember how I told you that recording the book length would help you in scheduling later? This is when that advice comes in. Fill each month with a reasonable amount of project reading first, in whatever order makes sense for your project. Then you take a look at what other types of reading you want to do this year, like escapist fiction, group or buddy reads, book clubs, reading events, general nonfiction, any other kind of reading goals you have for that year. And you fill in all of your other reading commitments and wishes into your year as best you can around your project reading. I even highlighted my project books within my schedule. I didn't highlight anything else. I just highlighted my project books so that that would be front and center in my priorities. And then the last step, the 8th step, is to read and take notes. If you are working on a computer, you may want to have a folder within your project folder for reading notes. And then within that reading notes, general reading notes folder, you might want to have a folder corresponding to each list and make note-taking files for each book that you read. Once you've made your notes, you may decide to write book summaries or reviews from those notes. I wish I had structured my files that way. My notes and book reviews are now scattered. By the way, if you take notes within the book list itself, it takes way too long to scroll through the list to find the titles you're looking for. I hope that helped you feel like you could organize a reading project. Good luck with your project. If you're interested in seeing how I did the first part of my project, I will come out with a guide to reading the colonial period once I'm done reading those books. That should happen sometime this year. Take care.